What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest legends steps onto a talk show and within minutes, everything spirals completely out of control? What you're about to hear isn't just another celebrity interview. It's a conversation that went from charming to controversial, in a heartbeat, ending with security being called and a guest escorted off the set. Before we dive into this unbelievable exchange, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you won't believe how fast this moment went off the rails. It all started like any other episode. Kelly Clarkson, warm, charismatic, effortlessly welcoming, introduced Michael Douglas with her signature smile. The crowd cheered as Douglas walked onto the stage, waving, confident. That familiar movie star energy filling the room. Kelly greeted him with a hug and said, "Michael Douglas, welcome to the show. I've been a fan for years. Thank you for being here." Douglas smiled politely. "Thank you for having me, Kelly. I've heard wonderful things about your show." The mood was light, easy, but that would change fast. Kelly leaned forward. "You've been in Hollywood for decades. You've seen it all. What do you think has changed the most between then and now?" Douglas paused. His smile faded. "You know, Kelly, that's an interesting question. But maybe the real question is, have those changes actually been for the better?" The tone shifted. Kelly still smiled, but her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Right, I mean, there's been a lot of progress. Douglas interrupted. His voice was calm, but sharper now. "That's a word people use a lot these days. But sometimes, I wonder if we've confused progress with something else entirely." A ripple of tension passed through the studio. Kelly tilted her head, trying to keep it friendly. "What do you mean by that?" Douglas leaned back. "I mean, we've built a culture where everyone's terrified to say what they really think. Everything's filtered through what's acceptable, what's politically correct, what won't get you canceled. And that's killing authenticity. And storytelling." Kelly shifted in her seat. "I think people are just becoming more aware of how their words affect others." "Michael, that's not necessarily bad." "Conscious," Douglas echoed. "Or controlled, there's a difference." Kelly, "When I started, artists took risks. They made people uncomfortable. That's what great art does. Now everyone's just trying not to offend, and we're producing the safest, most sanitized content imaginable." The audience was silent now. Kelly tried to steer the ship back. "But don't you think some of those risks came at the expense of marginalized voices? Some old films don't exactly hold up today." Douglas's jaw tightened. "Problematic. Another buzzword. Everything's problematic now. You can't tell a joke, can't explore a flawed character, can't challenge an idea without someone writing an article about why it's harmful." Kelly stayed calm, but her tone was firmer. "With respect, Michael, asking for inclusive storytelling isn't censorship. It's recognizing that media has power, and with that comes responsibility." "Responsibility to who?" Douglas shot back. "To the loudest voices online, to people who think they're the moral judges of what everyone should think and feel." Kelly drew a breath. "Two people who've been misrepresented or excluded for generations. Is it really so wrong to want stories that don't hurt others?" Douglas leaned in now, his voice rising. "Everything's about impact. What about intent? What about context? Art reflects reality, and reality isn't always clean or kind. It's messy, complicated. Art can reflect reality." Kelly replied, without repeating the same harmful narratives. "That's not fear, that's growth." Douglas shook his head. "No, that's fear. Most of this industry is terrified of losing work, of being labeled, of saying the wrong thing. And that fear doesn't create art, it creates mediocrity." Kelly straightened. Her voice was calm, but her words hit back with quiet force. "Then maybe what you call mediocrity, the rest of us call progress." Kelly took a steady breath, her voice soft but firm. "We're telling more diverse stories now, giving platforms to voices that have been silenced for decades. That matters." Douglas tilted his head, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Does it really? Or are we just checking boxes? Diversity for the sake of diversity without asking whether we're actually saying anything meaningful." The tension in the studio could be felt. Kelly's hands gripped the armrests of her chair as she tried to hold her composure. "I think you're oversimplifying a very complex conversation, Michael, and honestly, I'm surprised by your perspective." Douglas's expression hardened. "Why?" "Because I'm not nodding along with the current narrative. That's my point. Kelly, we can't even disagree anymore without someone acting shocked or offended." Kelly's tone stayed even, but her jaw tightened. "There's a difference between honest disagreement and dismissing real concerns about representation and inclusion. Right now, it sounds more like the latter." Douglas leaned forward. "Legitimate, according to who?" "You. Twitter. A few activists who think they speak for everyone." Kelly suddenly rose from her chair, something she never did "Michael, I think we need to take this in a different direction. This isn't what I want my show to become." Douglas stayed seated, his eyes locked on hers, defiant. "Of course you don't. Because real discussion makes people uncomfortable. It's easier to shut it down, isn't it?" Kelly's warmth vanished. Her voice turned to steel. "This isn't about shutting down a discussion. It's about not using my platform to dismiss the very real experiences of people who've been fighting for a place in this industry." Douglas rose to his feet now, standing across from her. "Your platform," he said bitterly. That's interesting. I thought I was invited here as a guest, not to parrot your opinions back to you. The audience froze. No laughter, no applause, just a charged silence. Kelly's professional smile was gone. You were invited for a conversation, Michael, not a lecture on how inclusivity is somehow ruining entertainment. That's not what I said. Douglas shot back, his tone clipped. But you're too wrapped up in being right to hear anything else. Kelly pointed toward the edge of the stage, her hand trembling slightly. I think this interview is over. Douglas didn't move. His eyes burned into hers. You're really doing this? Throwing me off your show because we disagree? Kelly's voice rose, clear and final. I'm ending this because it stopped being respectful. You're a guest, and I won't let you use this space to belittle progress people have worked decades for. Douglas shook his head slowly. Belittled? There it is again. You hear what you want to hear. I never said progress was bad. I said, we've lost something in the process. But nuance doesn't exist anymore, does it? You're either completely on board, or you're the enemy. Kelly took a step closer, her voice steady but sharp. That's not fair, Michael. You came here and dismissed real concerns as people being too sensitive. You implied caring about impact kills creativity. That's not honesty, that's dismissal. Douglas fired back instantly. No, that's truth. But I guess truth doesn't matter as much as conformity these days. You want me to sit here and pretend everything's perfect? That no one's allowed to question anything without being labeled a villain? Kelly's eyes flashed. What I want, she said slowly, is for you to recognize that your point of view comes from privilege. You've had opportunities most people never even got a chance at because of their race, their gender, their background. So forgive me if I don't feel sorry that you have to be more careful with your words now. Douglas's face went red. Privilege. There it is. The word that ends every conversation. Just discredit everything I say because I was born in the wrong category. Never mind that I've worked my entire life. Never mind my struggles, they don't count because I checked the wrong boxes, right? Kelly's voice cut through his, don't twist my words. Michael, I'm not dismissing your career. I'm asking you to listen. To understand that change doesn't erase your success, it expands the table for everyone else. Douglas laughed cold, bitter, disbelieving. But there was no humor in his laugh. Fair? Douglas repeated bitterly. Let's talk about fair. Is it fair that actors are now afraid to take certain roles because they might not be the right ethnicity? Is it fair that writers need diversity consultants just to make sure they don't accidentally offend someone? Or that one poorly worded comment can end a career overnight? Kelly's hands trembled slightly, though she tried to steady her tone. You're confusing accountability with oppression, Michael. They're not the same thing. People facing consequences for their words and actions isn't persecution, it's progress. Douglas's voice hardened. Consequences decided by who? There's no trial, no context, just an angry mob on social media ready to destroy someone the moment they slip up. And you call that justice? Kelly's expression darkened. Her words came out slow and controlled, each one deliberate. I call it people finally having a voice. I call it communities that were silenced for decades finally being heard. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, including you, maybe that discomfort is long overdue. Douglas took a sharp step forward, his voice rising. You think you're on the right side of history, don't you? You think you're fighting the good fight, but all you're doing is creating a new kind of intolerance, one where everyone has to think the same, say the same, believe the same, or be cast out. Kelly stood her ground, her eyes unwavering. I think I'm on the side of basic human decency. I think I'm on the side of fairness, of giving everyone a shot. And if you see that as intolerance, then maybe that says more about you than it does about me. Douglas scoffed. Basic human decency, he repeated, his tone dripping with sarcasm. That's a nice slogan to hide behind, but what you're really enforcing is conformity. Everyone has to publicly support every cause, every movement, or they're branded a bigot. That's not decency, Kelly. That's authoritarianism with a smile. The audience began murmuring, some visibly uneasy, others leaning forward, unable to look away from the collision unfolding before them. Kelly glanced toward the crowd. Suddenly remembering where she was live, cameras rolling, she turned back to Douglas. You know what, Michael? I've given you plenty of time to speak. You've made your position clear, and I've made mine. This conversation isn't going anywhere productive. Douglas's voice dropped into a cold sneer. Productive meaning, I agree with you. That's the only outcome that counts here, isn't it? Kelly turned toward the wings. Security, please. The words hit like a THUNDERCLAP. Douglas blinked, disbelief flashing across his face. You're calling security? For what? Having a different opinion, Kelly faced him again, her voice shaking slightly, but steady enough to sting. For refusing to leave when I ended this interview, for turning my show into a battleground for views that crossed the line of respect. Douglas's anger exploded. Disrespectful. I'm disrespectful. You called me privileged, dismissed everything I said, twisted my words, but I'm the one being thrown out. Kelly's voice cracked under the weight of emotion. Yes, Michael, because at the end of the day, you're complaining about having to be considerate, while others are still fighting to simply exist, to be seen, to have a chance in this industry. Your complaints don't compare to that struggle. Douglas's face was red now, his composure shattered. You have no idea what you're talking about. You sit here in your bubble, surrounded by people who agree with everything you say, thinking you understand the world, but you don't. You understand your version of it, the clean, approved version, where everyone claps for the same opinions. Kelly's voice cut through him like steel. I understand enough to know this conversation is over. Security should be here any second. Douglas turned, noticing the cameras again, the stunned silence of the crowd. You're really doing this. You're going to have me escorted out like a criminal. And you think that makes you look good? Kelly didn't flinch. I think it shows that I won't let my platform become a stage for disrespect. You were invited as a guest. Michael, and guests don't get to hijack the show. Douglas gave a bitter, humorless laugh. My agenda? You mean having an actual conversation instead of just nodding and smiling? What a terrible crime. Two security guards appeared from the shadows of the wings, hesitant, uncertain. Kelly nodded toward them. Please escort Mr. Douglas from the studio. Douglas stared at her, disbelief giving way to something almost wounded. This is unbelievable. You realize how this looks, right? How this feels? Kelly's reply was quiet, but it landed like a verdict. It looks like someone refused to respect my show and my audience. The two guards stood between them, uneasy, waiting. One of them, a tall man with silver at his temples, finally spoke softly. Mr. Douglas, if you could please come with us. One of the guards said quietly. Douglas raised his hand. Give me a minute. He turned back to Kelly, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. The fury was still there, but beneath it, something else stirred. Disappointment, maybe even regret. You know what the saddest part of all this is, Kelly, he said softly. We're not even that far apart. If we actually listen to each other, instead of performing for the cameras, we might find common ground. But that's not how things work anymore, is it? Kelly's face didn't soften. Common ground requires mutual respect, Michael, and you've shown none of that today. Douglas gave a small, bitter laugh. I've shown no respect. I came here to have a real conversation, not to smile through rehearsed questions and plug my new movie. I thought you, of all people, would appreciate honesty. You built your name on being genuine, on being real. Being real doesn't mean being cruel. Kelly replied, her voice steady but trembling just slightly. It doesn't mean dismissing other people's experiences because they don't fit your worldview. Douglas shook his head slowly. You keep saying I'm dismissing people, but what you're really doing is dismissing me. Every point I've made, you've turned it into some moral flaw. You decided I'm the villain in this story before I even opened my mouth. Kelly folded her arms tightly. You made yourself the villain, Michael. The moment you started complaining about having to be thoughtful about representation, about considering how your work affects others, those complaints tell me everything I need to know about your priorities. Douglas's voice was quieter now, rougher. My priorities are creating meaningful art, stories that challenge people, that make them feel something. And somehow, you've twisted that into selfishness. Kelly didn't back down, because when you say that caring about inclusion kills creativity, that's what it sounds like. You're saying your freedom to create matters more than other people's right to be seen with dignity. Douglas stared at her for a long moment. You really believe that, don't you? That's what you think I'm saying. What else should I think? Kelly asked. You've spent the last 10 minutes arguing against the very changes that made this industry better for so many people. What other conclusion is there? Douglas turned slightly toward the audience, then back to her. The conclusion that maybe we can both want the same thing, but worry about different parts of the journey. That maybe we can fight for inclusion and still care about creative freedom. That maybe the world isn't as simple as heroes and villains. Kelly's jaw tightened. That sounds noble, Michael, but in practice, what you're defending is a time when people like me, people who didn't look like you, had to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. I won't apologize for not being sympathetic to that. Douglas's shoulders sagged slightly. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for understanding. Change always comes with trade-offs. We can celebrate progress and still talk about what we might be losing, but you won't even allow that conversation. Because that conversation, Kelly cut in sharply, is so often used to undermine the progress itself. It's always the same, admit some things got better, then pivot to the downsides. It's how the old system stays alive under a new name. Douglas's eyes flashed again, frustration reigniting. Or maybe it's just honesty. Maybe it's noticing that fear has taken over Hollywood. Fear of saying the wrong thing, casting the wrong face, writing the wrong line. And fear doesn't make great art. Kelly, it makes safe art. Sanitized art. The kind that offends no one and moves no one. Kelly took a step closer, her voice rising, trembling with conviction. You keep talking about fear, but maybe, just maybe, a little fear is good. Maybe people should be afraid of perpetuating harm. Maybe they should think twice before reinforcing stereotypes. That's not censorship, Michael, that's human decency. Douglas met her eyes, the tension in the room thick enough to choke on. At what cost? he asked, his voice low, raw, and final. At the cost of honest storytelling, Douglas shot back, his voice echoing through the tense studio. At the cost of complex characters who don't fit into neat moral boxes, at the cost of art that actually reflects the messy, imperfect reality of being human. Kelly's reply was sharp enough to cut glass. Those are excuses, Michael. They've always been excuses. People said the same thing when they were told to stop using racial slurs, when they were asked to write women as more than side characters, when they were told to show LGBTQ people as human beings, not punchlines. And every single time, the art got better, not worse. Douglas's eyes darkened. Don't you dare compare me to those people. Don't you dare suggest that caring about creative freedom is the same as defending bigotry. Then stop sounding like them, Kelly snapped. Stop using their arguments. Stop acting like being asked to think about others is some unbearable burden. The security guards shifted nervously near the edge of the stage. One spoke up, firmer now. Mr. Douglas, we need to go. Douglas ignored them. His gaze locked on Kelly. You want to know what I really think? His tone dropped, quieter, colder. You're scared too. You're terrified of being on the wrong side of these debates. So, you just comply. You adopt every approved belief, every safe opinion, because it means you'll never be criticized, never be challenged, never have to defend your ideas. Kelly's face burned. How dare you? She shot back. You don't know me. You don't know what I've fought for, or what I believe in. You're just angry that someone finally pushed back, that someone finally told you your version of truth isn't universal. Douglas's voice sank lower, almost menacing now. I'm angry that we can't even talk about this anymore. You called security instead of having a conversation. That tells me everything about your so-called commitment to dialogue. You talk about inclusion, Kelly, but you only include people who already agree with you. Kelly raised her hand, pointing straight at him. No, you don't get to twist this. You came here to use my platform to complain about progress, to belittle the real struggles of real people. And when I refused to let that stand, you acted like a victim. That's not me silencing you, that's me refusing to amplify ignorance. Douglas turned toward the guards, then back to Kelly, his voice quiet now, almost reflective. You know what the real tragedy is? In 10, 20 years, people will look back at moments like this, and they'll see it differently. They'll see the rigidity, the fear, the refusal to engage with anything that doesn't fit a narrow view, and they'll wonder how he got here. Kelly's tone was pure ice. Get him out of here. The guards finally stepped forward, taking hold of Douglas's arms. He didn't resist, but his stare never left Kelly. This isn't over, he said, his voice steady but low. This conversation, this debate, it's happening everywhere, and throwing people out won't stop it. Kelly stood firm. I'm not shutting down a conversation, Michael. I'm choosing not to participate in one that denies people's humanity. There's a difference. As the guards began to lead him off stage, Douglas called back over his shoulder. Keep telling yourself that, Kelly. Keep believing you're one of the good ones. Maybe it'll help you sleep at night. Kelly's hands trembled. Her breathing was shallow. The studio was silent. The audience didn't know whether to clap, to boo, or to simply stare. For a moment, Kelly just stood there, shaken, exhausted, unsure. But then she straightened her shoulders, took a breath, and faced the crowd. I apologize for what you just witnessed, she said finally. That's not the kind of show I want to run. But I won't apologize for standing up for what I believe in, or for the people who've spent decades fighting to be seen and heard. That matters more than any guest. No matter how famous, the applause began slowly, hesitant, uncertain, then grew louder, filling the studio with a fractured mix of approval and discomfort. Not everyone joined in. Some faces stayed still, troubled. Kelly noticed. And for just a second, her expression wavered, a flicker of doubt, maybe realization. Crossing her face, she looked into the camera, forced a weary smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We'll be right back after this break. And just like that, it was over. Michael Douglas was gone, escorted off stage. Kelly Clarkson stood alone under the studio lights, having won the battle. Perhaps, but looking, just for a moment, as if she wasn't entirely sure she'd won the war. The cameras cut, the lights dimmed, and the audience murmured among themselves, trying to make sense of what they'd just seen. So there, you have it, a conversation that began as a friendly celebrity chat and ended with one of Hollywood's biggest legends escorted out of the studio. What do you think? Was Kelly right to end the interview, or did she overreact to a difficult but necessary conversation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories like this.